So here we are. It is January 3rd, 2024. This is the first video of the year. And I thought I'd start this year off with a video about how would you be able to spot auction houses that sell fakes and copies of Asian art if you don't know anything about Chinese and Asian art. All right, I'm going to assume that some of you know some things, some of you know a lot, some of you know a little, it varies. But there are basic rules, with or without any knowledge, of common sense that you can put into work, to put into place when you're looking at auction houses and searching around on Live Auctioneers and Valuable and these other websites to filter out the fakes right off the bat. Just instantly know they're not selling real things. All right, and it requires a little effort. It requires a little bit of digging. But if you don't care about that, you don't care about making mistakes and filling up your closets with reproductions that you thought were worth $100,000 that you managed to buy for $2,000, this isn't the video for you. But if you really want to learn about it and how to filter auction houses out and use common sense in doing so, there are a number of steps and questions you should forever be asking whenever you look at items in an auction. If it's other than one of the major auction houses or very well-established regional auction houses that have good reputations. Reputations of auction houses are crucial for a bunch of reasons, and not only just the obvious one, but for example, auction houses are basically unregulated in many states. They can do a lot outside of the law because there are no laws. Basically, they can break moral laws all they want, and there are certain things that should trigger alarm bells in your head when you come across them. And I'm going to go through them. And keep in mind that great collections, long-standing collections, old collections that are presently held are known among the collecting world. There are no secret collections, in other words, really. I mean, there's of greatness. Imperial porcelains, rare bronzes, early jades, that sort of thing. These collectors are known. They're known by the auction houses, the major auction houses. They're constantly courting them for consignments. They would love to sell their collections when the time comes, if there's going to be a sale and that sort of thing. And there's a lot that should be read into that when you're looking at items that are supposedly from a great collection. Okay, so let's just hop into it. Okay, the basic understanding is the misunderstanding that people have. They think the auction industry, when you look at an auction house online, you go in there with the mental mindset that, well, they're regulated, they're licensed, they're insured, they're bonded, they must have experts on hand because that's the business that they're in. All right. The simple fact of the matter is that only about half of the states in the United States require any sort of licensing at all. And in many, many, many of those states that require licensing and those that don't, if you're doing an online auction only with no people present in the room bidding, in other words, it's just all digital. There's even less requirements in many states like Massachusetts, here where I am. The auction licensing commissioner told me once, we have no authority over auction houses that are doing strictly online auctions. We can't talk to them. We can't touch them. They have no audience. We have no jurisdiction. Is basically what it lands on. So you have to keep that in mind always, that you're in the Wild West. Auction houses in general are the Wild West, and if they don't have a fantastic reputation among other collectors and dealers, you probably don't want to do business with them. All right, and there's a whole bunch of things that they can do that are that the law can't really or doesn't really care about. And I've talked to people in government officials. I've spoken to FBI agents, and I can tell you across the board, there's no interest whatsoever, any serious interest by anyone in going after these auction houses. There just isn't. They don't care about it. The stuff's not copyrighted. They don't do anything unless there's a huge complaint. Most people that buy fakes are too embarrassed to do anything about it. The credit card companies won't give you your money back, and that's it. You're out the money. And that's the basic deal, all right? Auction houses can, and we've illustrated it many times here, they can fabricate provenance. They can make up names out of whole cloth, claiming things that belong to all kinds of people. There's no way to stop. They can even include pictures of famous people, and there's no leverage. There's nothing in place to stop it. They can lie about age and authenticity all they want. They can all, because they all have disclaimers in their bid agreements that says that we can't be held liable for any misstatements of authenticity, condition, or anything else. You're on your own. All right. They may tell you it's Ming or Yuan or Sung or Tang or Han or something else, but there's absolutely no legal leverage behind that if they are mistaken or if they've openly mislied to you. All right, so they can lie about originality, they can lie about age, they can lie about provenance. All right, they can even mislead you about certain things by saying, "Oh, well, these aren't that rare," and and act like they don't know. And of course, well, the whole time that the real ones sell down the road or New York or London or Hong Kong for 6 figures, 7 figures. And this guy's saying it's not rare, so he must not know what he's talking about. Therefore, I can go to his auction and buy a bargain. All right. No, that's not. He knows. These guys know what's going on. Basically, an auction house can do or say almost anything they want to induce you to bid and buy. And there's more or less no enforced laws regulating any of this industry other than you must get the property if you pay for it. If you bid on something in an auction and they don't send it to you, that's a prosecutable offense. That is mercantile fraud. All right, and they can go after you for that. But as long as they arrange to get the piece to you and you've paid for it, they're off the hook and they don't owe you anything. All right, and that's simply the fact of the situation. Always keep in the mind the word rare in your mind, what the word rare means. And if something is rare, but you keep coming across them, a bell should go off in your head and say, yeah, there's something wrong here. I'm seeing these all over the place. Does this mean that they're not rare, or does this mean that I don't know what I'm doing and these are all just copies? If that's happening to you, you're probably not aware that they make a lot of copies. And they make tens of thousands of copies every year and flood them into the markets across the United States. And we're going to look at a few auction houses that specialize in this to sort of drive home the point a little. All right. The other question you have to ask is, if you're sort of new to collecting, you've been doing it for less than 5 or 10 years, and you see, and even in that short time, and you see amazing things or what look to be amazing turning up in auction houses in rural areas, and we've harped many times on auctions down in Georgia. There's auction houses in New York. There's 2 auction houses here in Massachusetts. We're operating for a while. One of them still is. It sells nothing but fakes and copies. There are lots of them around, and they just continue on and on and on. And you have to ask yourself, well, who's consigning to these people? Are there really that many? There's one auction house out there, I think it's Mercis or something. They do an auction a week of amazing looking stuff. Fortunately, a lot of it doesn't sell because the world has figured out that Mercis auctions in New York sells mostly copies. I think they're in New York or Myrtle Beach. I forget. They're in the East Coast somewhere. They sell nothing but fakes. And for a long time, they were selling them, and now their auctions are sort of coming up dry, and they'll have to probably change their name. A lot of them do that. They'll have a name in one state, and then they'll move to another state. Empire Auctions, that was in New York for a long time, suddenly found itself operating out of a closed shop in Boston for a few years. I don't know if they're still there or not. They probably are. And they were running 2 or 3 auctions at a time on the internet. All fakes, all copies. But then there are some bricks and mortar operations that do the same thing, like Eden Gallery, Roswell Gallery, the auction house there in Florida that we talked about that was selling the collection of C.T. Liu famously a year ago, and on and on and on. But the other question you want to ask yourself is, well, people have built these collections and are presumably knowledgeable and have purchased them at the major auction houses and are everybody's keenly aware of what the major auction houses and some of the larger auction houses get for things. So why in the world is the stuff not being consigned there? And if you can't satisfactorily answer the question by saying it's a fake and these auction houses wouldn't touch it, you're going to be taken. Because people will not consign these kinds of things to anything but the major auction houses and the well-established auction houses that are here in Hong Kong, in England, in France, and so forth. And there are a number of them that are quite good. All right, but spotting these dangerous auction houses requires just a little bit of looking, a little bit of examining. And one of the things you want to say is, does the auction house have a website? Okay, and if they have a website, what's it look like? All right, what kind of website are they running? And I'm going to show you a website that belonged to one of these operations. This is Roswell, the Roswell auction house. Hold on a second. All right, and this is their entire website, okay? And it's got scant amounts of information on it. This is it. The whole site is this. They have a few photographs. They have upcoming and past auctions, and that's it. All right, they have a contact button. and they give out an address of Northfield Court, Roswell, Georgia. And you can always take that, of course, and cut and paste it and put it into Google and see what that looks like to you. All right, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be either a home, some sort of office building with no sign for the business out front, or I've seen them using vacant lots. I saw one that was a vacant lot with a garage in the middle of it. That was the address that was given to live auctioneers on the business. This is their website. It's just basically a one-page site with a couple of links with a few pictures on it, and that's it. And if you click the auctions button, it brings you right over to live auctioneers, and this is the auction house. All right, and this is what they do. And if you go down here to the bottom, what you see is you see 29 past auctions over the last few years, and all you see are things that would be extremely rare and valuable if they were authentic. All right, and then when you click open some of these sites and you pull up some of the results, what do you see? Well, you don't see high prices. You don't see crazy high prices. You see some prices that are much more than they should have been, but you see, Joan de marked bowls that sell for $400,000 or $500,000, sold for $1,300. Blue and white jars supposed to be Ming, $550. And so on. And this is what you see typically throughout these. Occasionally you'll see some outliers that do sell for a lot of money, but typically it's just because a couple of people were believers and they bought into it, and they got stuck. Basically they got nailed, they got screwed over. All right, and that's what happens. And you can just go through here. Eden Galleries, of course, is legendary for selling copies and reproductions, and making up all kinds of crazy names of collections and so forth. I noticed one of the things they started doing a few years ago was that they started leading with photographs for their auctions. And you'll say, oh, well, look, they're selling other antiques. Right. Well, if you go to this auction and you click on it and you look at it, what do you see? It's all Chinese fakes. All right. All Chinese fakes. Nothing sells for more than $1,000 to $2,000, and people come to these sites and think, this is the place to buy it. You buy it here and send it to Sotheby's. Why didn't somebody else think of this? All right, and here's more and more of them. Now remember, the lead photographs were actual antiques. All right, so it's sort of like we got some antiques, but we threw some Chinese stuff into just for the fun of it. All right, and at the very, very end of the auction, there were those 3 antiques. All right, and they sold for $2,000, $1,600, and $900 respectively. Maybe somebody consigned them. I don't know what the story was, but the impression that was given by the primary photo for this auction was that this is what they're selling. They're selling antiques, but when you get to the page with the items on it, there's nothing there but Chinese fakes and copies. And this is sort of what happens endlessly in these sales, all right? And you have to look at those past auctions of these auction houses. Go check out their website. Do they have any experts on staff? Do they have any any sense at all that they can authenticate anything? The person that they have, for example, if he's their in-house Asian art expert, you should be able to Google him and turn up all kinds of things about him on LinkedIn and his bio, and he worked at other auction houses and so forth. That's not uncommon. People move around from auction house to auction house. That's very common. And you can, in a couple of minutes, dig up everybody's histories because they tend to be fairly public people. All right, the people will leave Christie's and go to Bonhams. They'll go to Bonhams. They'll go to Christie's. People will move around in the trade, so to speak. It's very, very normal. Expect to see that. But if you don't see that and they don't have an expert on staff, you're looking at an auction house that sells fakes and copies. All right, and you should do a little bit of due diligence with Google. Look at the address of the building, of the operation. Look at their licensing if it's posted online. A lot of auction houses are required to register filings with the state that they're in, or they'll have incorporation papers. You can find out who the principals are. You can find out what the main address of the business is. And if it doesn't look like a legitimate business, but they're offering all these extraordinary rarities, you should immediately head for the hills. You have to back check auction houses before you spend money with them is what it amounts to. All right, and these people that are claiming that things came from, a past famous collector or dealer and so forth, predating 1970, it's nonsense. All right, it's nonsense. Nobody with a major everybody that has a great collection in America of Chinese art, they know they have a great collection of Chinese art, and they don't call Joe Dokes down the street to come and sell it. They're very aware. They're sophisticated. They understand. It's been in the family. And anybody who's collected in recent years is even more keenly aware, because the chances are the person who collected it, if they collected authentic things, bought all of it or a big chunk of it from major auction houses and major dealers. And if you've bought from major auction houses and major dealers, you're a known quantity in the collecting world. And if you go to sell something, they're going to want to talk to you. That's all there is to it. If you're a collector and you bought everything from in London, you bought everything you own in your collection from Eskenazi and Marchant, and your grandfather bought from Spinks and Spielman and all the big names, and you now have a collection on your hands. You call Christie's or Sotheby's or Bonhams or Doyle in New York or Freeman's or Drew Eats or Woolley and Wallace or any of these auction houses, they're going to be delighted to come to your house. There's not going to be a lot of begging going on. They're just going to show up and say, yeah, we knew about your grandfather, we knew about your father, we knew about you buying things, and we'd be happy to go through the collection for you and decide the best course of action to take for you. All right, this is not complicated. The major auction houses do not shut people out if they have good things. All right, I hear this over and over and over, that people say, well, I couldn't get it into a major auction house because it's a closed club and all this. And there's some dealers out there that actually have this kind of stuff published on their websites. Absolute rubbish. If you have a great thing and you get a hold of a major auction house, they're going to take it. And if they don't take it, it's because they have doubts about the authenticity. That's all there is to it. Well, you may say, I've done my research, or I've done this, and I've done that. It may be that they made a mistake. That can happen. But if you go to the next auction house, they're not going to make the same mistake. You're not going to go 2 for 2. All right. If you have the 3 major auction houses in the world telling you pieces are copies, the chances are they're copies. All right. If they tell you it's a good item, but it's not the kind of thing we can sell, what they're really telling you is that it's just a little bit under our price point that we're looking for. And the big auction houses, the majors, the 3 majors, have gotten rather selective about that in recent years, because the cost of running auctions has gone up so much over the recent years. The internet did not make auctions cheaper. It made it more expensive because of all the extra stuff you have to do and the added fees and percentages taken by credit card companies and payment systems and all this. So they have to charge a bit more. But you can certainly talk to them. They will talk to you, and so forth. So when you hear somebody saying that this came from a famous collector or a Chinese general or some other nonsense, that had this amazing art collection, don't think for a second that if it was authentic, it wasn't going to end up in a major auction house. That's all there is to it. And I see it over and over and over. People think there are. People think, well, I can get this at this little auction house in Iowa because everybody missed it. No, nobody missed it. That's just not what happens. There are people who spend all their time on the internet every day, people who employ people who look on the internet every day, major collectors. They have staffs of people who search constantly. They're quite knowledgeable. They mark things that might be of interest, and they pass it along up the line to somebody that has more knowledge than they do, and they go through it, they verify it, they contact the auction house and all this happens very rapidly. And if you've ever seen an auction house where they, maybe not a famous auction house, but they got one lot, they had many lots, but they had one piece in it that turned out to be much better than they thought, you see what happens. It takes off, all right? And you go, well, how did that happen? Well, it was a one-off, all right? But if you see a whole page of great rarities turning up, or what looked like great rarities, be very suspicious. On rare occasion, something great will turn up in a minor auction house. It can happen. But it is not likely to slip through the cracks if it's authentic at a bargain basement price. The chances of it doing that are very, very remote. And if it goes for a bargain basement price, it means the people that know this stuff said, no, it's a copy. It's a later copy. And it's too bad that you bought it. All right. The other things you want to check too are things like we talked a little bit before about the addresses of these auction houses. Always check them out. Always cut and paste them. Very often you'll find them that they have a mailing address through a mailboxes, etc., or Fred's Box Store. These places that do pack and shipping and so forth, because they need a bricks and mortar address for getting mail, and they don't want the stuff coming to their house. They want to remain well under the radar, so they use these oddball services to collect their mail. And you can find them. You can go there and say, hey, the only thing in the mail, the only thing on that address is this mailboxes, etc. Yeah, well, that's their headquarters. That's the world headquarters for that auction house, and that's what it is. Sometimes it's a single family residence. I've seen them. I've looked at them, and it's a single family house in some rural part of America. It's where the owner lives. It's all internet based. There's no physical content. There's no physical auction. There's no license involved. You're just buying it based on photographs that somebody's posted on the internet. And 8 times out of 10, they're Chinese nationals living here that have access to modern reproductions in China. They can get the photographs done for them. And you'll notice that a lot of times the photographs are all very, very similar. They have the same sort of blackish backgrounds, the same sort of dramatic lighting, all of this. This is all by design. And it's more or less, it's a bit of the Chinese mafia doing all of this, and it's a money laundering stuff. There's all kinds of stuff going on with these guys. Some of them are in human trafficking, from what I've been told, and things like that. All right. The simple fact is that what people are looking for is what we used to refer to in the business as sleepers. And a sleeper is an item tucked away in an auction that's been misidentified by the owner, misidentified by the auctioneer, and it is, in a box lot in a corner somewhere, and it's not expected to bring much money. Well, today with photography and everything that's being put on the internet, that doesn't happen very much anymore. It used to happen in the old days when there was no internet and you had to drive 5 hours to an auction and spend 2.5 hours going through everything. Yes, on occasion you would find incredible rarities, incredibly rare things that are going to end up in a box lot for $200 or $300, and you can sell it in London back then in the day for 50 or 100,000, and that's something that did used to happen. It happened not irregularly in the world of Asian art, especially in the 80s and early 90s. It was something that went on. There was no internet. So everything was eyeballs on the objects, or if you were dealing with an auction house that was very good at advertising, maybe they put lots of photos up and attracted some attention that way. But very often, country auctions here in New England especially, auctioneers would come in to clean out these old summer estates and oceanfront houses, and they would put things out that were just amazing. Amazing paintings, amazing things that were bought in Europe during the Grand Tour in the 1800s that came into maybe they had a city residence, they were wealthy. The stuff ended up moving to the country house when they retired. And then the country house, the house on the ocean, got passed down through several generations. Everybody forgot where the stuff came from. And then one day they decided to go and sell it. They call the local auctioneer. He comes in. He doesn't really know much about very advanced art. He takes it all. He puts it up. And then you have to go to the auction and do the filtering for him. And very often things would get discovered, and instead of bringing $100,000, they might sell for $10,000 or $15,000 or $5,000, and then you have an opportunity on your hands. But other than that, those kinds of auctions don't really happen much anymore. The market has gotten extremely efficient, and this notion that a lot of people have that they can look at the internet and they can go through and they can spot stuff in auctions. They have some sort of sixth sense about it. No, it's not likely. If you've seen a lot of stuff, you can do it. And from time to time, we've done it here on this channel. We'll spot things that seem insanely underestimated, insanely undervalued. And lo and behold, what happens? It was estimated at $200 to $300. It sold for $20,000 or $30,000. Why? Because the internet is efficient. The internet is efficient. And if it happens there, it happens everywhere. And those are just a few cases. You can go through, find hundreds of cases of things that have been absurdly underestimated. Even the big auction houses, as we did in the video a month or so ago, we talked about estimates, and they're only accurate about 1/3 of the time, 1/4 of the time. The rest of the time, everything sells for over estimate, sometimes 2 times estimate. So estimates are notoriously difficult, but at least with these bigger auction houses, they at least get the identity right. They're off on the price, they're off on the value. They're not, maybe they missed something about values of these items in recent years, or something is lacking, but they're certainly capable of identifying things. Typically, they do make mistakes there occasionally, but in general, they are extremely accurate. And many of the pieces they're selling have been sold publicly before. They've been sold by Christie's before. Now they're at Bonhams. Now they're at Sotheby's. Now they're here. Now they're there. They're at Druitt's in England. They're at Pandolfini in Italy. Who knows? But most great things that turn up in the art market are known, and the people who collect them are known. And if an auction house that's selling copies puts out the name of the collector, Google him. Google that collector and find out, is he famous? And if you can't find anything on him, if you can't find any mention of him, is either being typically they either come up right away as a prominent collector, a member of the Asian Society or some sort of art society, art association or something, or maybe he was a dealer for a time, something like this. You'll either get that, or you'll find out that he was an incredibly successful business person of some type and had somewhere in there you'll find out he had an interest, if you read his bio, in Asian art or antique collecting or art collecting in general. All right, some people that are big collectors like to keep a little bit of a low profile on the subject because they don't want to get hit over the head in the middle of the night and robbed, which is understandable. But at the same time, they're completely findable. You can at least find mention of them. But if you have somebody who's named in an auction and you look the guy up and you can't find any information about him at all, it probably means the stuff isn't very good. It probably means the stuff has been bought in recent years and is comprised mostly of copies. And then if you look at the stuff and you read about it, and you find out the guy's been collecting for 30 years and it's now being sold in some little auction house, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. All right. So those are my thoughts going into the year. Be very careful. Examine the auction houses as closely as you examine the property. And, right now, the number of auction houses that are around that you can truly, pretty much rely on, there's a handful in the world. There are some good ones. We have Bronx here in America, which is very good. We have Sotheby's and Christie's and Bonhams and Doyle's. We have Freeman Gallery, Druitt's, Woolley and Wallace. All these companies I've mentioned many times, Pandolfini, many times, mention them over and over and over again because they're in the business, they know what they're doing, and a lot of the people that are around them have no idea what they're doing. And of course, there are lots of good dealers in London and so forth that you can go to, and in New York you can go to for good information. There's some good dealers, a couple of good dealers in Boston, Polly Latham and these people that know their stuff cold. There are places to get information and to buy and collect and have a good time and not worry about being taken. All right. If you're a price buyer, you're going to be wide open to being taken. If you're new at it and you're not that familiar, you stand a pretty good chance of being taken. There's a lot of things that can happen to you, but applying a little common sense and understanding that the Asian art market is this very sophisticated one, and people who have great collections know about where to sell them. They know which auction houses to use, which auction house they're not going to use. If you had a collection of Van Goghs, you're not going to take it to some little auction house in Paducah, Iowa. No offense to the people in Paducah, but they're not going to take it there. It's going to go to London, New York, or China these days, even for American art. They're increasingly getting into the business of buying those over there. This is where the market is. And if you see things that have great, claims of great rarity being sold in some little auction house, unless there's some extraordinary circumstance surrounding its arrival there, the auctioneer was the man's best fishing buddy friend, and you wanted to give him a huge payoff after his death. That's one thing. Doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen at all that I've ever heard of, but it's conceivable, I suppose. Anyway, these are the things you want to look out for. You want to be very careful. You want to avoid any auction house that seems at all dicey. Look at their past sales. Look at the things that they've sold in the past, the auctions, their headlines for auctions, and then go from there. Okay. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Bye-bye.